The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as the final transmission ended. Ambassador Vrek of the Tellurian Empire closed all 6 of his eyes, his mandibles clicking in resignation. The war was lost. The Krellian swarm had broken through the last defensive line at Sector 47, and nothing stood between their hungering fleets and the heart of civilized space. 300 worlds, Counselor Mira whispered, her scaled skin pale with shock. Gone in 4 cycles. The holographic display showed the devastation in cruel detail. Planet after planet, consumed by the swarm's endless hunger. The Krellians didn't conquer or negotiate. They simply devoured everything in their path, converting all biological matter into fuel for their ever-growing armada. We must evacuate the core worlds, High Chancellor Torvin announced, his voice heavy with defeat. Order all remaining fleets to cover the civilian transports. Perhaps some of us can reach the outer rim before, wait. The voice came from the back of the chamber, where the human delegation sat quietly observing. Captain James Blake stood, his plain blue uniform a stark contrast to the ornate robes and armor worn by the other delegates. Vrek's translator struggled with the human's strange accent. Captain Blake, your species joined the Council only 2 cycles ago. You cannot possibly understand the magnitude of... We understand extinction events just fine, Blake interrupted, his tone cold and measured. Earth has survived 5 of them. What we need to know is this. Are you ready to do whatever it takes to win? The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. The humans were a curiosity to the Council, a strange species from a backwater world that had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. Their planet was classified as a Class 12 Deathworld, a designation so extreme that most species considered it uninhabitable. Yet somehow, these odd bipeds had not only survived, but thrived there. Whatever it takes. Torvin repeated, leaning forward. Captain, we have thrown everything at the swarm. Our most advanced weapons barely slow them down. What could your species possibly offer that? Not our species, Blake said quietly. Our world. He gestured to his aide, Lieutenant Maya Torres, who activated a new holographic display. The image showed Earth, the terrible blue marble of crushing gravity, violent weather, and deadly biology. For the past 2 cycles, you've kept humanity at arm's length, Blake continued. You've restricted our trade routes, limited our Council participation, and made it clear that we're tolerated, not welcomed. You know why? Because you're terrified of us, of what we survived to get here. Vrek shifted uncomfortably. It was true. Every species that had reviewed Earth's environmental data had been horrified. Gravity nearly double galactic standard. Atmospheric oxygen levels that would be toxic to most races. Weather systems capable of generating winds that could tear starships apart. Oceans filled with predators that made military dreadnoughts look fragile. And the diseases. The endless, evolving diseases. We call ourselves the lucky ones, Blake said, his eyes scanning the chamber. The soft ones who made it to the cities and the stars. But humanity didn't start in cities. We started in the places that wanted us dead. The deserts, the ice sheets, the deep jungles and the high mountains. And some of us never left. Torres brought up new images. They showed humans unlike any the Council had seen. Massive individuals with muscles like industrial cables, their skin scarred and weathered. They wore minimal clothing, despite standing in environments that looked lethal. One image showed a human carrying a dead creature the size of a shuttle on their shoulders, grinning at the camera. Meet the Doomworlders, Blake said. Humanity's frontier colonists. The people who looked at Earth's most hostile regions and said, I can live there. The ones who wrestled predators for territory, who survived plagues that would wipe out your entire species, who learned to thrive where everything wanted them dead. Myra leaned forward, her voice skeptical. And you think these primitives can defeat the swarm where our fleets have failed? Blake's smile was grim. Primitives? Commander, these people train by wrestling Earth megafauna for sport. They dive into volcanic regions to harvest minerals with their bare hands. They've survived in environments that would kill you in minutes. And now, after centuries of genetic drift and adaptation, they're even more resilient than their ancestors. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. You've been fighting the swarm like it's a military problem. Ships against ships. Weapons against weapons. But the swarm isn't a military. It's an infestation. A plague. And humanity has more experience fighting plagues than any species in this chamber. Torvin stood slowly. You're suggesting boarding actions? Sending ground forces onto swarm vessels? Not just any ground forces, Blake corrected. Doomworlders. Humans who've been preparing their entire lives for exactly this kind of fight. People who understand that sometimes the only way to kill a monster is to get your hands dirty. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Boarding swarm vessels was considered suicide. The ships were filled with toxic atmosphere, lethal temperatures, and Krellian warriors bred for close combat. No council species had the physiology to survive those conditions long enough to cause real damage. But humans came from Earth. Glorious, terrible Earth. How many can you field? Freck asked quietly. Blake glanced at Torres, who pulled up a new display. The frontier colonies have volunteered 12 million Doomworlders. Another 8 million from Earth's hostile zones. All veterans of surviving in environments that make Krellian ship interiors look comfortable. 20 million, Mira breathed. Against a swarm of trillions. 20 million humans who see this as Tuesday, Blake replied. 20 million people who grew up fighting just to breathe. 20 million warriors who've been training in gravity, twice what your species evolved in. Against predators that make Krellian soldiers look friendly. He walked to the center of the chamber, his footsteps heavy in the silent room. The swarm thinks it's the apex predator, that nothing can match its aggression, its resilience, its hunger. But the swarm never met a species that crawled out of hell and called it home. Torvin looked at the other council members, seeing his own desperate hope reflected in their eyes. What do you need from us? Transport, Blake said immediately. Get our people to the swarm vessels. After that, we'll handle the rest. And if you fail? Freck asked. Blake's expression hardened. Then you'll know that the swarm killed something that survived 5 extinction events. Something that conquered the meanest planet in known space. And you can write in your histories that humanity went down fighting, just like we always have. The vote was unanimous. 3 days later, the first wave of human Doomworlders arrived at Sector 47. They came in converted cargo haulers and mining ships. Vessels too crude for Council military service, but perfect for the brutal work ahead. Commander Krell of the 4th Tellurian Fleet watched in disbelief as the humans prepared for deployment. They wore minimal armor, just enough to provide oxygen and protect against vacuum. Their weapons were shockingly primitive by galactic standards. Blades, hammers, chemical explosive launchers. One group carried nothing but sharpened metal poles. They're insane, his tactical officer whispered. Krell couldn't disagree. But as he watched them board the assault shuttles, laughing and joking as if they were heading to a festival rather than certain death, he felt something he hadn't experienced in weeks. Hope that the shuttles streaked toward the nearest swarm ship. A massive biovessel 3 kilometers long. Point defense systems shredded half the approaching craft, but the humans had planned for that. The survivors crashed through the organic hull like spears, tearing deep wounds into the ship's structure. What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations. The Doomworlders poured out of their shuttles into the swarm ship's interior, moving with shocking speed despite the hostile environment. The temperature was hot enough to cook most council species. The atmosphere was corrosive, and the gravity would have crushed a Tellurian's bones. The humans barely noticed. They fought like nothing Krell had ever seen. No formation, no tactics, just pure aggressive violence, backed by terrifying strength and speed. A Krellian warrior that could tear through combat drones was beaten to death by a human's bare hands. Another was impaled on a crude metal spear and used as a battering ram against its companions. But it wasn't just the combat prowess that stunned the watching fleet. It was the endurance. Hours passed, and the humans kept fighting. They pushed deeper into the ship, breathing the toxic atmosphere through their primitive filters, ignoring wounds that would have killed any council soldier, adapting to the chaotic environment like they were born for it, because they were. The first swarm ship went dark after 6 hours, then a second, then a third. Over the next 2 weeks, the pattern repeated across Sector 47. The swarm, for the first time in its expansion, encountered something it couldn't simply overwhelm. Every ship it lost cost it resources and production capacity. Every boarding action forced it to divert forces from the front lines. The humans were few compared to the swarm's numbers, but they struck with surgical precision, targeting key vessels and disrupting the swarm's coordination. And they never stopped. Where council soldiers needed rest, medical care, and extensive support, the Doomworlders just kept fighting.